It was quite the surprise when Sebastian Vandenberg entered my quaint little tavern. We had not seen each other since medical school, and my recollection was that of a bitter rivalry. He of good breeding and wealth, and I a boy of poverty and morbid proclivities. Moreover, a degree of misfortune had fallen upon me, leading to my unceremonious dismissal from university. Thus, my lowly state as an innkeeper. Not to the esteemed Sebastian's surprise, however, for in his eyes I had found my true calling. Calloused fingers and dirty bedpans. Sebastian had always been vexed by my insatiable curiosity to know the true insides of men. That perplexing and annoying desire, his remembrance of me, and that cruel intolerance, my remembrance of him. I had fully expected Sebastian to regale me with tales of entitlement and success as I tended to him, no doubt to shower further insult, but his eyes fell upon the strange box that sat atop the mantel, and it captured his attention quite fully with its peculiar design and carved symbols. Unable to contain his curiosity, he asked me of it. How the box came to me. Yes, now that certainly is a story perfect for a foreboding night such as this one. I need no prodding to tell it, for the life of an innkeeper is not a particularly interesting one, full of strange tales, save for the ones that enter quite unannounced on stormy nights. I remember it clearly. It was autumn, All Hallows' Eve. Unseasonably cold and rainy weather had left the inn quite empty, other than the eerie dancing shadows cast by the fireplace. The door opened suddenly, filling the inn with a gust of damp, bitter, cold air. Standing in the doorway was the figure of a man, ghostly and gaunt. He seemed to carry the weight of the world upon his shoulders. It's a twisted posture I recognize well in my chosen profession. I welcomed him with a hearty greeting, to which he hardly paid any mind. He seemed troubled, melancholy, and simply coasted into the room as if carried along by a thick fog. Rather than shake off the cold by the fire, as most visitors are inclined to do, he sat in the corner, huddled in the darkness. What an odd man this was. As I approached him, I could see his face more clearly in the faint light of the fire. He was as pale as a waxing moon, with eyes dark and brooding sunken into his skull, like a walking corpse. Oh, the sense of gloom that immediately invaded my spirit in his presence. Before I could speak, he gripped my wrist tightly, pressing hard into my flesh. With a raspy voice, quivering with desperation, he spoke. "I am to die, innkeeper. This eve, when evil spirits wander among the living, they come for me. I had hoped to find refuge at the church in West Hampshire, but alas, it is here where I must pay the price for my misdeeds." Surely, in the spirit of the festivities, this was a Hallows' Eve jest meant to frighten me, yet I could not respond. As his vacant eyes fixed on me, I could feel a chill in my blood, a stream of ice water cascading down my spine. My tongue had knotted in my throat. He continued, "An important task falls to you, innkeeper. A task of utmost importance." It was in that moment the stranger retrieved the wooden box. The box, every bit as odd as the man who held it tightly with a slight tremble in his hands. It was like no box I had ever laid eyes on. He spoke, quite forcefully. "In the exact moment of my passing, you must trap my very soul in this box." Surely he was mad. Being a man of science, this prognosis had to be true. Locking one's immortal soul in a box was certainly the delusions of one whose reason is slipping. "I am not a good man, nor have I lived a righteous life. I have done terrible things, committed atrocities that would sink into your mind until every thought a nightmare. This evil that had taken hold of my will, that steered my hand and spilled much blood, is a sickness, an infection, a pestilence as fatal as any that has devastated the country. And it must stop. This box was fashioned by a holy man of many disciplines, a man well versed in the sins of the known world, trained in the seeds of evil. and how to thwart it. You must trap my soul in this box upon my death, close it tight and lock it. Heed my words carefully, innkeeper. You are not to gaze into this box for any purpose, for evil is a cruel disease that does not discriminate. Once infected, the heart withers away, leaving only a hunger for death. I do not envy this duty that falls on you, for you look like a man of simple means, but fate catches up to us all, as it will for me tonight. Perhaps this box will cast one last redemptive ember of light in a darkened soul. Will you do this? Being a man of great curiosity, I agreed, if only to witness the full extent of this poor soul's madness. That evening I sat by the stranger's bed with the open box nestled in my lap. He tossed and turned, a restless sleep without respite from a troubled mind. I had heard of such cases, of those who had fallen victim to a sickness of the mind. It is a tragic ailment, not easily excised by a scalpel. As his breath grew shallow, I tell you, and you may fancy me mad, but a darkness crept into the room, like an ashen mist seeping through the cracks in the walls. It chilled my blood. As the stranger's final moments drew near, the floor trembled underfoot, boards creaking and pulsing as if mimicking his beating heart, and the air, cold and putrid, heavy with dampness. Most concerning of all, I felt as if we were no longer alone. An inhuman presence, all at once incorporeal and coursing with palpable malevolence, was present for the stranger's last breaths. He sprang up in bed, clutching his chest. He cried out, his face contorted, eyes glazed over a milky white. Then his body seized violently before he fell limp. It was in that moment a coldness permeated the wood of the box like clutching a block of ice. I could feel its weight shift. I swear that something had crawled into that box, not a creature, but the tendril of a dark winter storm, writhing, fighting to free itself from the container. Forthwith I closed it tightly, and all at once the room emerged from the darkness that had encompassed it. I placed my hand over the stranger's heart and felt nothing. He was assuredly dead. But the look in his eyes is something that will haunt me for all my days, as if the last thing his eyes had gazed upon was of unimaginable horror. There would be no everlasting peace for this tortured soul. This is the story of how the cursed box came into my possession, and there it sits, an ancient evil held at bay by a lowly innkeeper. My old classmate exploded into boisterous laughter. Surely you jest? Do you think me a simple-minded fool to fall for such preposterous fabrications? A man of science believes not in phantasms, bad omens, and evil curses. True, at times my interest was piqued, but old friend, you are no better a storyteller than a student of medicine. To this, Sebastian cackled with cruel glee, mocking me. He could scarcely control his laughter. The tale of a cursed box containing an unquenchable evil malady that attaches itself to one's person like a cloak is the pinnacle of ignorant nonsense. Moreover, that you would be up to the stranger's task and heed his dire warning not to open the box and thus stave off a supernatural hunger for death? Poppycock! You have always been of a tragically weak disposition and would most certainly have succumbed to the trapped malevolence due to your inexorable curiosity. In this regard, Sebastian is quite correct. Poppycock indeed, for I am no different now than I was at university. Inquisitive to a tragic fault. Yes, I did open the box, and let me tell you, the stranger too was correct. There is no end to the hunger for death. It is bottomless. An emptiness as black as pitch and constantly yearning. Yes, it is true. I have always had an insatiable curiosity to know the true insides of men.